yeah, I would love to hear like your perspective of how do you feel into that part of the ego?
Yeah, it's a very nuanced topic because again, there's lots of different ideas of ego. So I always stay really concise with my definitions so we all can be on the same page. And from my perspective, ego is just the activity of identifying. So, Hana is something that the source is doing, something that the universe is doing. So ego is that conception that I have my own separate independent will that can be even opposed to the universal will. And when that idea goes away, when you realize there can't be a separate will than the one divine will, then everything is equally valid. So you become the universal ego, you might say. In Hindu tradition, the word is Brahman for the universal ego. And so, Aaron is something that the universal ego is doing. But when my sense of self is no longer, I am this separate individual entity that occupies a body, I have to take actions to preserve this body and enhance this body and self and whatever, then everything is seen as my own will. When I become that universal ego, every person, every activity, every event, everything is unfolding exactly as I will it to. So it's impossible to have resistance towards life anymore because it's just that, like I said, that sort of blistering recognition of perfection. Like if I see a soul, a person who's dishing out suffering to others, I don't see a mistake being made. I see karma and inertia acting itself out according to the divine plan that every single, dream character, so to speak, in the dream has been given the ability to have its own unique journey to choose between positive and negative polarity. And the extent to which it chooses either polarity will dictate its karma, and it will have to act out that karma. And it's happening perfectly everywhere you look.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see anything wrong anywhere I look. But from the universal ego standpoint, the universe is self-organizing and self-correcting because the whole plan is it wants to know itself. So it doesn't want to get too lost in delusion. Delusion is serving a purpose to be the contrast. Darkness is the contrast to light. But the point is light. The point is understanding my true nature. So in that sense, both are equally valid. But when love sees something out of balance, it seeks to correct that imbalance, but not in a forcible way, but like by offering whatever help is available to that person at the time. So that's why we'll say, people are only able to act out of their current state of consciousness. So you can't change anyone, you can't fix anyone, but you can offer your own energy. You can offer your own embodiment of truth and love. And, energies are always interacting because everything's connected. And so maybe in my atmosphere, I can sort of invite them energetically into a higher state of seeing. And so that's what service becomes. So it's like I'm no longer obligated to save anyone, to be a hero, because the universe isn't broken, right? To believe it's broken and I need to fix it, that's ego. That's creating a separate will that needs to correct the divine will. And so much of the time, unwittingly in spirituality, we do that. We can sort of slip into that role. If I need to be the savior, the hero for other people, rather than I need to just play my part that source wants me to play. I need to be the bee that looks for the open blossoms. And that's all I'm ever doing. And if the blossom's closed, that's because it's supposed to be closed. And that's perfect, right?
And I feel like that is that solar plexus chakra consciousness, that the willpower, that's where the ego comes in with the willpower and the way that we shine our light. And in astrology, it's actually the sun that represents the ego.
Mm-hmm.
And the sun rules Leo, the sign of Leo, which is the star, the queen, the king within us.
Mm-hmm.
And also it's interesting because Leo is in the opposite of Aquarius. And we're moving into this age of Aquarius now, where we are finding this balance between Aquarius and Leo energy. And we're coming out from the age of Pisces, which was like this balance between Pisces and Virgo. And Pisces was all about, you know, transcending the ego and having to really get away from the 3D consciousness self, transcend into higher realms, into oneness. And Virgo helped us to create the routines, the prayers, the rituals on a regular basis, the discernment of what we let in so that we can reach that state. And we are right now at this threshold between the two, which is so fascinating. You know, like Yeshua was like the bringer into the age of Pisces, and now we're moving into age of Aquarius. And it's finding like, okay, how can we refine this balance between Aquarius, the universal mind, the universal consciousness, and Leo, which is the personal identity, which is the sun, the ego that makes us special in who we are, and that helps us bring in these, or allow ourselves to receive these ideas from the universal consciousness grid that we have all access to. But how it will be expressed is uniquely depending on us, on our individual free will and the way that we express ourselves and shine our light in this world. And I feel like that is, I think we might differ a little bit in the definition of ego here, because I think it has different layers to it, you know what I mean? But like in astrology, the ego is the sun, which is like the way that we are special, the way that we shine our light,
Individual
our willpower,
expression.
exactly, our individuality. And then there's the ego that is the program that just kind of like runs through it, as you were saying, that, you know, identifies with literally every single thing. And then it goes into an extreme where we forget that we're actually universal consciousness, and we're actually just experiencing ourselves as this human being here in this reality. It's one of many lifetimes and timelines, and
Right.
you know, so let's talk a bit about how can we feel into that other aspect, into the goodness of that ego aspect, you know, and seeing it as the guru, as you were saying.
Well, to your point, I think the way that we bridge those two, Aquarius, Pisces, is the understanding that transcendence doesn't mean you lose anything. And that's why there's always this resistance for most people who are maybe like kind of sort of coming into their spiritual awakening, and they hear you need to transcend your ego. And there's obviously still a lot of ego, which doesn't like to hear that. So it's like, oh, no, that can't be possible. You must integrate it and have a healthy ego and stuff like that. And so the analogy I like to show people is, if I am identified as my hand, and I believe I'm the hand, for sure I'm the hand, no doubt about it. And someone's like, Aaron, you have to transcend your hand. I'm like, no, I don't want to lose my hand. Well, but then let's say I do transcend my hand, which is the realization, oh, I'm the whole body. I'm not just the hand. Do I lose the hand? No. Now the hand is put into the right balance with everything else. It finds its rightful place. So I'm not obsessing over it anymore, but when I need to use it, I can use it. And this is what happens when we transcend mind, is that mind just becomes the servant rather than the master. Transcending mind doesn't mean you become brain dead or something. Mind is, in the spiritual sense, the faculty of labeling the world. This is why, you know, Hindu tradition will say there is no world, meaning there's no world outside of you, because you make it up with your projections and your labels. Whenever the mind labels something, it puts a name to it or an idea to it, it only ever relates to the label and never to the thing itself or the reality in the present moment. And so the extent to which we allow the mind to label the world and then think, you know, we take those labels to be facts, the more we suffer, because we're making the dream world more and more real. And the more real the dream becomes to the mind, the busier the mind gets thinking about it and trying to sort it all out. So the more suffering and entropy is created in the mind. So we go backwards in that process by negating the reality of our definitions and denying the reality of the world outside of us and saying, no, there's no world outside of me because I'm not a separate self. The whole world is myself because I am the one being just experiencing this body right now. And it's dreaming of all these other characters too. There's just one being. And if we all agree with that and clap to that and say yes to that, well, then it might do us good to like really feel into that. What does that mean to say there's only one being? It means that you're me right now, having this experience, having her experience. And the more you feel into that, the more the idea of being a separate self apart from life, who has to struggle with life and things like that, begins to drop away. And as we said before, you become totally accepting of reality the way that it is, because you see it as perfection. So transcending ego is just transcending the belief that, like when I'm dreaming at night and I'm in a dream, whether it's a good or bad dream, doesn't matter. If you've ever had the experience of becoming lucid in a dream, could you possibly say you lose anything when you become lucid? The only thing you can say you lost is delusion, right? You realize, oh, I'm the dreamer of the dream. So now whatever's happening in the dream is of no real consequence to me because I know it's just a temporary experience, right? And we can have that same recognition in the waking state. And that's all enlightenment is. So this person, this configuration of energy called Aaron, people call Aaron, continues to go on as it always did, but without all of those imbalances and distortions of selfishness and pride and the need to overcome others. The ego makes us all less unique, not more unique. The ego makes us all automatons, if that makes sense, because all egos want the same thing, right? Fight to get to the top, be number one, overcome the other, possess the other, control the other. So really, ego makes us less and less unique. And all of those individual expressions of source that all of us are hampered by that and obscured by that. So to be empty of that separate self is to be full of the divine, because you find that more of that divine energy is able to express without those blockages of ego in the way. So transcending ego doesn't mean transcending personality or individual expression. In fact, quite the opposite. You find that all of those things become far more empowered and enlivened with the absence of this belief that I'm struggling against life and trying to, fight to get to the top, and all of these ideas that ego has ingrained in us. It's just a product of sort of Darwinian evolution of, survival of the fittest. Ego is sort of a leftover remnant of that. And so we're at the place in our current evolution of consciousness where that egoic faculty of mind has sort of outlived its usefulness. And human beings are beginning to wake up and move into the fourth chakra or fourth density of consciousness, which is unity consciousness. And all that is the recognition that, yeah, we're all, experiencing separate bodies and having separate experiences, maybe, but we're all one being, one consciousness. And so if we get on board with that, then we realize there's nothing to struggle or fight against. We can all work together and be in this together and celebrate each other's uniqueness. Because if I know that I'm you, then I can look at all of your unique properties and expressions and go, wow, look how amazing I am. Like, look what I can do in that form. I had no idea. So you become an experience of me, and everybody does. And that's a world that I think we're probably at least a few hundred years, maybe 1,000 years away from. But it's really cool to see, especially with the internet and the ability to connect with people like we're doing right now, that this awakening is happening everywhere. And slowly the recognition that I must be something more than this little isolated self that just lives a short, finite lifetime and all those other ideas, that can't possibly be my true reality. And if all of us are feeling that at the same time and awakening out of that, then there must be some truth to it, right? It's always about getting out of the way. And ego is just that which gets in the way. And once you see that, there's no fear in transcending that, because it's not real. It never was real. And true healing and true freedom comes from that recognition. I call it freedom before, not freedom from. Because if freedom from is the way we heal, then we never really can be free. If bondage is actually possible for the source, then source is screwed, right? The source is always free. It's never actually bound. It's only lost in ignorance. And the awakening to reality is the recognition of, oh, that's never been true. Not that it was true and I got free from it. It's that it never was true. And so ego just binds you to those illusions that we project onto the world of, I'm this person, this has happened to me, I've really been traumatized, it now defines me this way. And we get wrapped up in those stories. And the more wrapped up we get, the more disconnected we get from our divine self. So, if you think that ego has anything to do with what makes you unique and individual, then you won't want to transcend it. But in the topic of this conversation, that's why ego is very divine, because it serves as, in a sense, your guru, because it shows you everything you're not, everything that causes you suffering, everything that separates you from your divine essence. And it gives you a really good chance to experience those things and learn about them so that you can eventually go beyond them. And that is the experience of self-realization. If you are the source already, if you are reality, then how can you see yourself if you are yourself, right? You can only see what you're not, if that makes sense, because you are it. So if we try to see what we are, if we look for what we are, then we have to be looking from a false point of view, from an egoic point of view. So self-realization is never the act of finding or discovering myself. It's really just the act of standing convicted in who I am. No, I am that. I don't care what the mind says about it. I don't care what life circumstances seem to indicate. I know I am that. I am the source. And as we stand convicted in that, the illusions begin to drop away, because the reflection of who I am is what I'm not. You can never be away from yourself. Like, if I want to take a look at myself, how can I stand outside of myself and look at myself? I can't do it. So you're always that. You've never been anything else. So thank goodness for the ego in that sense, because it is what source is doing to give itself that mirror to know what it's like by experiencing what it's not. Only by knowing separation can we really know what love is. Only by knowing sadness, depression, anxiety, and stress can we really know what peace is. And that's the beauty.